This video is about CSCS Round 3. It was held at Toronto Motorsport Park SB layout, which was a new layout. It was in reverse and they had two chicanes. So it was a bit of a different thing. But unfortunately for this event I ran into some weird issues, which I later found out was because of my own fault. I had relocated the battery from the trunk of the car to inside the car. And while I did that, I didn't connect the negative terminal of the battery back to the battery controller, which is in the trunk. I just connected the negative terminal straight to ground, which caused some weird issues, the ABS not working and a few other electronics just behaving weird, which you'll later see in the video. But anyways, here's how everything went. Okay, so it's early morning Sunday, and I'm just getting everything ready for the CSCS time attack. This is going to be round 3. And the thing is that it's been raining all night, and there's a heavy chance of rain today. So hopefully things should be a little interesting. But yeah, the goal for today is hopefully just go out there, try to work on my driving a little bit, and yeah, just treat it as a practice session. So yeah, that's it. Let's see how everything turns out. So starting off with the first qualifying, the first lap we did was behind a pace car just because everyone was new to the track, so I guess just to make things safe. We drove behind a pace car, and then from the second lap is where everyone started lapping. So talking about the track, this is Toronto Motorsport Park, but in reverse. It's called the SB layout. So the first difference is that the track is in reverse, and the second difference is there's two chicanes this time going down the main straight. I didn't like those chicanes too much because I guess they slow the track down. But I guess it was necessary to have them there because otherwise cars would have been heading way too fast down that straight, and there's no runoff area going into that first corner. So I guess it could have been a bit of a safety issue not having the chicanes there. And I guess the other reason is it also probably makes it better for the spectators because that's where all the people are standing and they get to see the cars go through the chicanes. So for the first qualifying, I didn't really set any good laps this qualifying because I was just trying to learn the track. Because weirdly, going backwards through the same track does feel like a completely different track because your approach to every corner changes. Just because all the braking zones are now where you're coming out of the corner and accelerating. Yeah, and talking about these chicanes, the other reason I didn't like them was because what later on ended happening was people would knock those pylons over, and then basically it would be other people would just take a straight line through that chicane and have an advantage over others. So I guess that's why it wasn't a good idea. But other than that, I really liked the reverse track. I think it was pretty interesting. It was a fun track. So now skipping to qualifying 2, this is where I decided to set a few fast laps, but that didn't really work out because this is where all the issues started. At this point I had lost ABS, but I didn't know that because I didn't brake too hard into this first chicane, so everything was fine. But for the second chicane I braked a little harder and the front wheels locked up. I was about to go straight into those pylons, but I just managed to release the front tires and steer the car. But it was pretty scary driving a car where the ABS just randomly cuts out when you're not expecting it. So after this, and the second issue was going into this corner, I went onto the power, and every time the rear wheels would spin after the ABS light was on, the car would just cut into neutral, which was pretty dangerous happening on the track because there were a few fast cars coming behind me. So I wasn't sure at this point whether to pull off the track, but then the car went back into gear, so I kept driving. And as stupid as I was, I attempted to do another hot lap after this one. I tried to set a good time this lap, but then the same thing happened, the car cut power. This time I was a little more cautious on the brakes because I knew there was no ABS, but even this time I think I locked up the fronts a little on that corner, on that second chicane. But I think it was one of these corners I went onto the power and the rear wheel spun again and the car just went into neutral again. So after this, what I decided was whenever the ABS light comes on, I'm not doing any more laps. I'm just going to go straight into the pits. That's where it happened. I just went on the power and the car lost drive again. And yeah, after this I didn't take any chance. So the ABS light would usually come on after every 2 or 3 laps. So basically, in every session I just got the first 3 laps usually. And after that I had to come back into the pits. Yeah, this was all just because of that battery cable, just because the ground wasn't connected properly, but I didn't know that back then. I thought it was a wheel speed sensor issue at this point because the code the car was giving me was for vehicle speed sensor, but no, it was actually a much simpler issue. So now qualifying 4 ended up being my best. This was a qualifying where I set my best lap time, and this actually ended up being my best lap time of the day because after this, in qualifying 5, it started raining, so like the track slowed down, and for the final time attack, my splitter, the cables on the front splitter broke, so the splitter was pretty much scraping the ground every corner, so I didn't want to push the car too hard like that. And also with the ABS issue, so because of both reasons, I didn't push the car at all in the final time attack. So yeah, I'll just skip right ahead to my fastest lap. So this ended up being my fastest lap of the day. It was a 125.9. And yeah, it was a pretty good lap overall. The only mistake I did make on this one was that I thought this was the start-finish straight, the start-finish line, sorry, the line between the two chicanes, but that wasn't actually the start-finish line. The start-finish line was before that. So because I started the lap at the wrong point, this could have been a slightly faster lap at 125.1. But yeah, because I started the lap I started pushing at the wrong point, it was slightly slower. But yeah, other than that, I think it was a pretty good lap, so I'll let you watch the whole lap. I think I was still going on the brakes too early because I just lost confidence in the brakes because of that ABS issue. I didn't know when the ABS would randomly cut off, so I didn't have too much confidence on the brakes. Other than that, I think there were a few gear changes that I missed. I wasn't in the right gear at the corner exit. That's because now the engine is really difficult to hear in this car. With all the soundproofing and everything gone, the car is really loud, and I don't hear the engine that much. So it's difficult to be in the right gear. But those are just minor things. Other than that, I think this is a good lap. So after this, the drifters put on quite a show for the spectators. This was pretty fun to watch. So I guess I'll let you watch some of this drifting that I recorded.
Yeah! Whipping it out! I think last time I checked there was 700 horsepower in that thing. Pretty rad setup. It's a neat setup. Someone's coming out with a sword, JDM sword from Japan. Hitting a nice outer zone.
And then after that, it started raining by the time it was time for the max attack. And by qualifying 5, when I went out again, it was still raining and the track was wet. Which I was pretty excited about because I had never driven this car before on a wet track. So I thought, I was hoping it would be a little more wet than this so I could slide the car around and have some fun. Because it was pointless trying to set laps on this qualifying anyways because the track was so much slower than when it was dry. But it was still fun. I did try to drift the car a little by the end, but the track still had a lot of traction, so I didn't want to hurt the tires too much. That's why I didn't do too much of that. But still, it was fun driving the car in the wet. So looking at the final results from all the qualifyings, I was 22nd overall. There were 75 cars in total and I was 22nd overall. But I was 6th in my category, the Super Street rear wheel drive category, which was a good thing because 6th was the last position I needed to qualify. And that's the other thing, the Super Street rear wheel drive category has become really competitive this year. Last year wasn't too competitive, but this year a lot of fast cars have come into this category. Yeah, but it's a good thing I made it through qualifying. But the thing is, I didn't improve much after this. Just because the cables on the splitter had broken and the splitter was scraping on every corner. And also because of that ABS issue, so it just didn't make sense pushing the car too much. So now getting to the final time attack, I was just warming up my tires over here on the back straight. And after this corner is where I started pushing it and started my my only lap that I set this qualifying. Well, I did 2 warm-up laps before this, but I didn't really set them because the first lap someone waved the yellow flag because someone had knocked one of those cones over for this chicane. And the second lap I didn't set that because I was too close to the car ahead. So for this lap I built a gap with the car ahead and I decided to do a lap. And the reason I wasn't pushing too much this lap was, like I mentioned, the splitter, the cables on it had broken off, and every time I would take a sharp corner or I would brake really hard, the splitter would scrape. So I was trying to avoid the curbs completely and not braking too hard just because I didn't want to damage the splitter further. The reason why the cables did break off was, I guess it was a stupid design to begin with. The cables were passing from underneath the splitter, and there was a bump on the track. Every time I would go over that bump, the splitter would hit, and hitting that bump over and over again eventually just wore the cables down completely and the cables broke off. But that's an easy fix. I just need to relocate the cables somewhere else so they don't go underneath the splitter and this doesn't happen again. But other than that, talking about aero, yeah, the rear wing opening and closing does make a big difference on this track. It wasn't working perfectly fine this time because I made a few programming changes and also because of that battery issue. The voltage wasn't well regulated, so the rear wing wasn't always opening on some of the straights. And every time it didn't open, it was a big problem because the car wouldn't accelerate. You really feel it when the rear wing doesn't open. After 160, the car becomes really sluggish and it doesn't accelerate that much. But that's an easy fix. Hopefully disconnecting that negative terminal should fix that as well. So yeah, other than that, let's just look at the final results. So looking at the final results from the time attack, my lap was 126.9, which placed me all the way back to in 31st, because that was a really slow lap. Comparing that to my qualifying time, which was a 125.9, which actually could have been a 125.1 if I measured that from the line that I thought was the starting and finishing line. But anyways, yeah, so this lap was pretty much 1.5 seconds slower than the pace of the car, which is okay because I know that it was just minor issues. I just need to fix the splitter and connect that negative battery terminal, and then hopefully the car should be back on its normal pace. So talking about my goal from now, first of all, I need to get these issues fixed, but that wouldn't take long. But then, yeah, I really need to complete the car now because the project has been waiting for a long time, and it's just that over the past 2 months I haven't really had a lot of time to work on the car. But fortunately now I do have a bit more time for this project, so hopefully you're gonna see some progress now. My goal in terms of lap times is to get in the 119s at Toronto Motorsport Park in September. That's when the final round of CSCS is, round 5. And I think round 5 is going to be even more competitive than this because all the fast cars come to round 5 because that's the final round. So yeah, I really need to get everything together for that. So yeah, that's my goal, to beat the 120s. I couldn't do that last year, so hopefully I'll try my best to get that this year. And to get the car complete, to get the turbos and everything working. So hopefully, yeah, I'll get started on the car right away, and you should see some updates whenever I make some progress on the car.